So as we're nearing the Passover, we're coming back to this, back into the Gospel of John, just to try to, we've been talking through some things with the Gospel of John. It's been a while. We've been back in the Torah portion for a while. And so just coming back to it, and it's been, interesting looking back in it. I've been working on this week, and just looking at what's going on in here. Started working on it, writing it on Tuesday and such as that, and just seeing how even in things that are supposed to unite us and such, sometimes it still causes conflict. And here we are at Passover in the Gospel of John, and we talked about it in the sense of how, typically when traditional theology and stuff organizes and understands the Gospel of John, they put it around the 7 signs or miracles: changing the water into wine, healing of the royal official's son, the healing of the paralytic at Bethesda, feeding of the 5,000, the walking on water, healing of the man born blind, and the raising of Lazarus. Some of them talk about the resurrection being the 8th sign, inaugurating the new age and such as that, signifying the week of creation with the new creation dawning, or the new covenant and such. So that's how it's typically understood and discussed. And so when we look at this, John, he is highlighting most of the other Gospels. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are looking at his time in Galilee, typically, whereas John spends a much more time in Judea, and that's primarily because he's organizing the feasts. He's organizing his discussion of what's going on around the feasts, particularly the pilgrimage feasts, which take him up to Jerusalem and up into Judea. And so that's a significant thing. And so we have, Passover in John chapter 2. We have this unnamed feast in John chapter 5, which is probably Shavuot or Pentecost. We have another Passover mentioned in chapter 6, verse 4. But there's some controversy about that one a little bit, because he's not ever mentioned being in Judea. John chapter 7 is Tabernacles. John chapter 10, it mentions Hanukkah. And then back in John chapter 11, it's kicking off into the Passover. And so he seems to be organizing these things about and around the feasts, more so than even the miracles are all of stories and accounts and things that happen within this larger movement of explaining why he's in certain places. And so if you know the feasts, you know where he's supposed to be, you know what's going on, you know what is typically talked about, and all of that. So really, it's hard to understand the Gospel of John if you don't take into account the feasts and what's being talked about. And I know most of y'all know that. So, but when we also look at the Gospel of John, there's this understanding that the Messiah is going to perform certain signs. There are certain things that the Messiah can do, and several times throughout the Gospel, he reminds people and talks to them about believe the signs that you see, the things that are happening. John chapter 10, verse 37 says, if I don't do the works of my Father, don't believe me. But if I do, even if you don't trust me, trust the deeds, trust the miracles, the works that you see. Then you may come to know and continue to understand that the Father is in me and I am in the Father. He says it again in John chapter 14. Believe me that I am in the Father and the Father is in me, or at least believe because of the works themselves. Don't ignore the signs. Don't ignore the things that are happening, the things that are identifying who the Messiah is supposed to be. And the rabbis and things, they divided miracles into 2 categories. Those which could be performed by anyone, who's empowered by God, filled with the Spirit. But then there are also those which only the Messiah is going to be able to do and perform. And so there were 4 miracles that the Messiah had to be able to perform. A healing of a leper, somebody who has leprosy, which was part of the reading from last night and such. We look at, there's even the parable of the 10 lepers and such, where Luke 17 verse 12 talks about them and saying, go and show yourselves to the priest. Go present yourself to them so they can, as a testimony, as a witness to them, so they can identify that, hey, wait a minute, somebody has just been healed of leprosy, whatever they considered it to be, and that'll testify to them, so they'll have to make a decision about the identity of the one who did the healing. It's going to force their hand, essentially, by having them go. These 9 have just been healed of leprosy by one guy, and you need to figure out who that is. There's also another account in Mark chapter 1. There's the casting out of a demon who causes the inability to speak. That's in Matthew chapter 12. There's a healing of a man that's born blind. John highlights that one in chapter 9. And then there's this raising someone from the dead who's been dead at least 3 days. And of course that's where they were at in John chapter 11 with Lazarus and things like that. So John is highlighting these types of things. And all of these miracles are highlighted in the Gospels. And so we see, like in Luke chapter 7, this is one of the ways that he identifies himself to John the baptizer, and such. If I can speak this morning. He says, at this very hour he was healing many of diseases, sicknesses, and evil spirits, and he granted sight to many who were blind, and answering he said to them, go report to John what you saw and heard. The blind see, the lame walk, those with taharat, the leprosy, are cleansed. So is he claiming to be the one who can do all that? Yeah. He's claiming to be the Messiah, the one who can do these things. And the deaf hear, the dead are raised. So just about everything that's only Messiah could do, he mentions. And the poor have good news proclaimed to them. And so it's just a powerful thing. The last miracle performed in John 11 was this raising of Lazarus. And of course it said that he has to raise somebody from the dead who's been dead at least how many days?
3 days.
And when Jesus gets word, when Yeshua gets word that Lazarus is sick, what does he do? Does he immediately set off and go? No, he waits. He waits 2 more days, and he's talking about our friend Lazarus is falling asleep, and he's about to die, but I am going to raise him up. So by the time he gets there, he's been in the tomb for how long? He's been in there for 4 days. So he's beyond this threshold that Messiah can do. So basically, we have discussions in this country these days, when there's somebody, when we have an election and people want to show up to go vote, what do we want people to have to do when they want to show up to vote? Show their ID to prove that you are who you say you are, and then you can participate in the process, right? Well, this kind of stuff, these signs and things are the Messiah's ID that the leadership was supposed to be looking for, that the leadership was supposed to be willing to announce and pronounce. Don't bother showing up to fulfill the feasts if you haven't even performed these kind of miracles. If we haven't identified and you haven't done these kind of things, don't bother even claiming to be Messiah until you do this stuff. Well, again, by the time we get to John chapter 11 and 12, he's done all of this stuff already, and everybody knows it. We get to John 11:45. It says, therefore many of the Judeans who had come to Miriam, to Mary, and had seen what Yeshua had done, put their trust in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Yeshua had done. So many are now beginning to believe he's Messiah because they're believing the signs, right? They're seeing these things happen. They saw him raise Lazarus after he's been in there for 4 days. And so there he is. Others are going to the Pharisees. For what reason?
The trouble.
Maybe. That's how I always understood it, is that they were going there to stir up trouble, to get him in trouble for what he's doing. But if they're seeing a specific sign that only Messiah can do, why might they be going to the Pharisees? Because they're going not just to the Pharisees, they're going to the temple, right? What are they going to try to get them to do? To come acknowledge what Yeshua just did in raising Lazarus from the dead after 4 days. They're trying to get him so they will come and verify and pronounce. So while they may be going to stir up trouble, and again, that's the way I always grew up hearing it, they may be going there to say, hey guys, you need to see this, and you need to identify this man and who he is so we can get behind him. Right? So that's why the Pharisees out there, they're among the common man. They go to the ruling priests and the Sanhedrin in verse 47. So the ruling Kohanim and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. They're going to address this issue of Yeshua doing these signs. He says, what are we doing, they ask. This man is doing what? He's performing many signs. Now, what signs are they wondering about? What signs is he performing that they're acknowledging? The Messianic signs. They're recognizing that he is doing these things. And they're like, guys, what are we going to do about it? He's doing them, and we can get behind him or not. But he says, if we let him go on like this, everybody's going to believe in him. And then the Romans are going to come and take away both our holy place and our nation. So they recognize Yeshua is performing signs. And it's not just any signs. He's performing these signs. And they're worried that everybody's going to believe him. Yes?
Well, it seems to me that there's almost a break in who's speaking. Because, what are we doing? This man is performing many signs. That sounds like it's the Pharisaical position.
Yeah, and because they're out there among the people.
Right.
They're the ones that probably were eyewitnesses to a lot of the things that he did.
Right.
And these guys are the ones that...
Yeah, these sound like the Sadducees there in verse 48.
That have never seen them themselves. Because remember, earlier in John, they would not leave Jerusalem. They wouldn't come down from the temple to give him... honor, to show him any respect by coming and talking to him. So, yeah, these guys sound like the decision makers who don't really know who he is and didn't see it for themselves. So that's a good observation. So, but they're worried that everybody's going to believe in him with or without their stamp of approval. If they don't do anything, people are still going to believe in him. So they've got to make a decision on it. And that was their real problem back in John chapter 5. Again, it's been a while since we've been there, but it's particularly verse 41 where Yeshua says, he does not need or accept, need the glory or recognition from men. He doesn't need their stamp of approval because he's got other witnesses that testify on his behalf. What's that?
Yet that is their job.
Yet that's their job, but he has witnesses that testify to him that are greater than they are.
I see pride and jealousy underneath the
Sure.
fear.
Oh yeah, we'll come to that. So they're worried that the people, by everybody believing in him, and of course what's their common conception of what Messiah is the division between Messiah ben David and the Messiah ben Joseph. Which one is the more popular? The Messiah ben David. And what does the Messiah ben David do? He raises up an army and he drives out the invaders, right, and sets up his kingdom. That's what they understand Messiah to do. But do they believe Yeshua is the Messiah? No. They don't. All these people are going to believe him, and then the Romans are going to defeat him. Right? They still believe the Romans are going to win. So by believing Yeshua is going to lose to the Romans, They were proving they did not believe the signs, that they did not believe he was the Messiah, because really, in all reality, not even the greatness of Rome would really be able to defeat the Messiah, right? If he's coming in power and glory with his army that he's going to raise, Rome doesn't have a chance, right? The United States would not have a chance against the Messiah coming in glory, right? Would you all agree with that? All right. So even with all of our military power and ability and submarines and aircraft carriers, we would still lose to the Messiah. So they were so convinced in the Messiah ben David, that they could not conceive the Messiah doing anything else. They could not conceive him doing, but they still believe he's going to lose. So they don't believe Yeshua is the Messiah. He's going to lose, and then we're going to lose. We're going to lose the temple. We're going to lose the nation. All right?
Vain imagination.
Yeah, well, but that's still their fear. That's still what they expect. Because had they seen this before?
Yes.
From others who claimed to be the Messiah? Yeah. They had seen others who claimed to be Messiah, who rose up and gathered an army, and they maybe were even successful for a little while, but then it was over, and they lost. And especially the people paid for it, but also the people in the temple, the leadership would oftentimes change hands, and you'd have to promise more favors or all this other kind of thing. So they would lose too, lose their status and such. So even Caiaphas, the high priest, in some ways, I think he's almost an inspiration for Spock from Star Trek, when he says, the needs of the many outweighed the needs of the few, or the one. Y'all remember that statement that is in Star Trek? Well, he says something very similar to that. Man, nobody gets my references. But one of them, Caiaphas, who is the Kohen Gadol, the high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing. You don't take into account that it is better for you that one man die for the people rather than for the whole nation to be destroyed." Now, here's the thing. Is he right? Yes, he's right. He is absolutely right. It is better that Yeshua die rather than the whole nation be destroyed, because without Messiah ben Yosef dealing with their sin, interceding on their behalf of the people like Moses did, what would happen? The nation would be destroyed. Not by the Romans, but by who? If sin has not been dealt with, who would destroy the people? God would. The holiness and the righteousness of God would judge the people and destroy the nation. He almost did it. If you remember, he almost did it with Moses. When he was like, man, these people are stiff-necked people. I'm done with them. I'll take them out and start over with you. And it took Moses interceding for them to avert all of that. But here's the thing. Yeshua's death does save from this truth. It's better for one man to die for the people rather than the whole nation be destroyed. He believes in Messiah ben David. That's what he thinks. That's what he's looking for. And yet he just explained Messiah ben Yosef. And he missed it. He didn't catch it. Because look, this is what the Spirit says. The Holy Spirit inspired John to write this down to basically confirm what he said. He did not say this by himself, but as the high priest, the Kohen Gadol that year, he prophesied that Yeshua would die for the nation. And he's right. And not for the nation only, but also so that he might gather together into one the scattered children of God. Is that right? Yes. That is also correct. Caiaphas was right in all of that. Messiah Yeshua was going to die for the nation, for the sins of the people, as the suffering servant. And his death is going to gather together into one the scattered children of God, the people of God. He was going to collect them together. But this is also a great example of how you can be right and still be wrong.
Yeah.
Right? You can be right and still be wrong. In other words, being right doesn't mean that you're right. That makes sense. Because even though Caiaphas' prophecy was correct, his interpretation, his understanding of what's going to happen to actually fulfill that prophecy is what was wrong. He didn't understand how it was going to work out. He just knew that this is what's supposed to happen, but he didn't know what it meant. He was right and he was still wrong, and it was so wrong that they began actively to try to find ways to kill him. From that day on, they plotted to kill Yeshua. And they even used the mandate of the feasts. They even used the mandate of the pilgrimage to try and do it. They tried to use Passover to get him, to catch him, to find him. That's verse 55. It says, "Now the Jewish Passover was near, and many people went up out of the regions to Jerusalem before Passover to purify themselves." And so they were searching for Yeshua, right? They're using the pilgrimage, the fact that he's got to come, and when he comes, we're going to get him. Right? They were searching for Yeshua, saying to one another as they stood in the temple, "What do you think? Won't he come to the feast at all?" Now the ruling Kohanim and Pharisees had given orders that if anyone knew where he was, he should report it so that they might find and arrest him. Report it so that they might arrest him. So that's their intention. They're going to use the Torah, they're going to use the Passover, use the good things of God to accomplish something that is not of God, right? This is not a good idea for them to go and kill an innocent man. But they're using the good things of God. You know, he was this, and now here's the thing, is Jesus oblivious to this, or is he aware of it?
He's aware.
He's very much aware of everything they're doing. He's very much aware of everything they're thinking. So does this conspiracy stop him from going to Jerusalem? They're looking for him. You know, is he going to show up or not? He knew the plots against him, but he still went. He still set his face toward Jerusalem. He was more concerned with obeying the Father because he was required to go to Jerusalem for Passover according to the Torah. He couldn't not go, right? If he didn't go, would he still be a sinless Messiah? No. He could not do that. So he had to go to still be qualified as the sinless Son of God. Yeshua could not undermine his Father's commands and not go for Passover. But here's the thing. Why did he go so early? You know, it says, John chapter 12, 6 days before Passover, Yeshua came to Bethany where Lazarus was, whom Yeshua had raised from the dead. So they prepared a dinner there for Yeshua. Martha was serving, and Lazarus was one of those reclining at the table with him. So why did he go so early? Well, because if he knew they were after him, you know, you might show up the day before. You know, give him as little time as possible to find you, to see where you're at, to catch you. But if you go back to chapter 11, verse 55, it says, "Now the Jewish Passover was near, and many people went up out of the regions to Jerusalem before Passover. For what purpose? To purify themselves." There was a process of making yourself ready, of preparing for the Passover that took days. You know, it wasn't just a show up, drop in your money, and you're good to go, right? It wasn't like that. It wasn't show up at the last second, give them your ticket, and you're still in. All right, there was a process for this. Yeshua would have to participate in these purifications in order to ascend into Jerusalem, in order to go into the temple and temple service and participate in the Passover. He would not have been given an exemption because of who he is, right? Because do they believe he's Messiah? No, the temple authority does not. So when all those guys, all those men are showing up for the Passover, do you think he's standing in line waiting his turn? Do you think they looked at him and said, oh, Yeshua, you're here. Well, we've got a fast track lane for you to skip all this stuff so you can go straight on in. Would they do that? No. They would not do that. So he would not have been given an exception. And so, this purification included sacrifices, including ones that they call the sin offerings. Could he do these without compromising himself? Could he still do these offerings and these sacrifices without compromise? Yeah, he can. Because these were not, even if Yeshua is presenting a sin offering and a fellowship offering, that's not an indication he was a sinner, but that this is what the Torah demands and expects for somebody who wants to come and ascend. Yeshua subjected himself to all of these things, to all the requirements of the Torah that applied to him, just as every and all people should. Right? Think about it like this. There's another example where this is the case, because Yeshua offering a sacrifice does not make him a sinner or compromise who he is. Look back to the baptism of John. When Yeshua went to him, John's baptism was a baptism of what? Of repentance. That's what he was doing. And since Yeshua had never sinned, he obviously had no need to repent, right? And that's why John came and said to him, it's like, hey man, I need to be baptized by you. But what does Yeshua do? What does he say? He did it anyway and was baptized, not because he needed to repent, but because it was necessary to fulfill, to bring about, to fully preach all righteousness. He did it even though it didn't directly necessarily apply to him. He did it because that was what was right. That's what was there and necessary. So he could participate in these things. Otherwise, he would not be able to be the Messiah and fulfill the role that he has. Right? So, again, it's 6 days before Passover. He shows up. He's there with Lazarus again. And they're preparing this table, Martha and such. At this point, what comes next is, where's that? I don't have it. What happens next is Mary comes in and does what? In John chapter 12. She comes in, right? Miriam took a pound of very expensive oil of pure nard, anointed Yeshua's feet. She wiped his feet dry with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the oil. Right? So she comes and she does that. She probably understood it as an act of this preparation. She pours this oil on his feet, and Yeshua identifies it. Hey, she's not just preparing me and anointing me to go into Jerusalem for Passover. She's actually preparing me for my burial. But again, here's the thing. This is one thing to notice. Even in Yeshua, in preparing the Passover, not everybody liked it. Not everybody was happy with what she did. Not everybody liked the fact that she took this pure oil and gave it to Yeshua. They thought that she had wasted it on him. Can you imagine that? That you would be there and here's Yeshua right next to you. He was like, man, what's she wasting that on him for? I don't think I'd want to be that person. But see, Judas did not accept it. He was only concerned about its value. He was concerned about the money of it, the value of it, and what he could get out of it. So her gift, her offering was an act of praise, was an act of worship. And so part of the conflict that we have to realize in preparing for Passover and approaching all these things is not everybody accepts the worship that we offer to God. Not everybody accepts what we have for Yeshua, our Savior and Messiah. How is it How could they accept? And you think about where we're at. You think about where we are in the world, between the mainstream church, between the Jewish people, and all these other types of things. How can they accept what we do and what we offer for Him when on one side so many don't understand it and they think you're going backwards, where on the other side they don't even accept Him as Messiah and what He has done for them? Right? The Pharisees did not accept Yeshua as Messiah, and so likewise they also didn't accept the way that Yeshua was going to fulfill the Passover, because He wasn't meeting their expectations. So Passover, even for Yeshua, was never going to be an easy affair, but the plan of God was counting on it. The plan of God took all of this into account. And so what we need to come to understand is that when we proclaim Messiah in the Passover, we actually draw the attention of the enemy in what we are doing. Because what the enemy thought was going to be this path to victory proved to be the vehicle of his defeat. And so he actually really, if he didn't like Passover before, because that was the remembrance of the people getting out of Egypt, he really hates it now, because it demonstrates the victory of Yeshua as Messiah. Your keeping Passover is going to bring rejection. It's going to bring abuse or condemnation. Your keeping Passover may result in misunderstanding and offense. And that is going to come from all sides, both Jew and Gentile, Christians and Jews. Both will think for different reasons, right, that this is not for you. You should not be doing this. Anybody heard that before, experienced that, felt that, gotten that from both sides? Mm-hmm. Yeah. From both sides. This is not for you. Because the Yeshua in the Passover proclaims something powerful. Yeshua in the Passover proclaims that the King has come. And those who testify and support that proclamation are not welcome in this world. Just ask what happened to Lazarus. When you look at that, chapter 12, verse 9, it says, a large crowd of Judeans knew that Yeshua was there and He came. So they probably knew the threats that were against Him too. And He showed up. So that was probably impressive enough. But they also knew not only for Yeshua, but also to see Lazarus, whom He had raised from the dead. So Lazarus' story is getting around. And of course his is a story of he was dead for 4 days. He was raised back. Only the Messiah can do that. So the ruling Kohanim made plans to kill not just Yeshua, but Lazarus. We've got to stop that story from getting around. So long as Lazarus is alive, people are going to think that Yeshua is Messiah. So because on account of him, many of the Jewish people were going away or deserting and putting their trust in Yeshua because of Lazarus, because of what he was testifying to. So Lazarus and his testimony about Yeshua were causing people to withdraw and going away or drawing away or deserting who? Who were they pulling away from? From the leadership, from the ruling Kohanim, from the authority, right? They were going to Yeshua. They were going to no longer coming to them for answers. They were then now going to whom many were starting to think was the Messiah. Is Messiah's authority greater than the ruling council, the Sanhedrin, and the priests and such? Yeah, it is. They may think they have the authority to identify and confirm him, but in reality his authority is going to be greater than theirs. And so if they ever did identify Messiah, that means they have to take a back seat. And not everybody likes that. So here's the thing, and part of the conflict that we face in today, when you think about the Messianic community, Messianic Jewish people don't like Messianics who proclaim Yeshua because it highlights the fact that they've rejected him. That's been a decision that was made. Neither do they like Gentiles who keep Passover, the Sabbath, and Torah at all. Because that also, as John said back in chapter 11, that is also the work of Messiah who draws the world to the Father, because that's what 11:52 talks about. That's what the true nature of jealousy will do, that Romans talks about, and how by ignoring the Passover in mainstream Christian thought and practice and all that, we have actually lost a crucial element of our witness and our testimony. We have lost a crucial element for it. He's going to die not for the nation, but that he might gather together into one the scattered children of God, to unite the scattered children of God. And so by ignoring the Passover, we are missing that part of the testimony that we are coming, that we are a part of it. The scattered people of God is bigger than what they expected, because it also included who?
Gentiles.
The Gentiles. That's the message that he was trying to get over to Nicodemus in John chapter 3, all the way back there. Our inclusion, the inclusion of the Gentiles, is one of the ways that jealousy for their own faith, jealousy for their own Messiah, is going to be revealed. And by not keeping Passover, not keeping the Sabbaths, not keeping Torah, we in the Gentile church, we've lost a key element of our evangelism to the Jewish people.
Amen.
Not to mention our own walk with God, not to mention our own obedience and understanding of what Messiah has actually done for us and the picture of the future that he will do. Because all of this proclaims and identifies him as king and ruler of this world. John chapter 12 says, the next day, this is when the large crowd that had come to the festival heard that Yeshua was coming to Jerusalem, they took palm branches and went out to meet him. They kept shouting, Hosanna, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, the King of Israel. And Yeshua found a young donkey and sat on it, just as written, do not be afraid, daughter of Zion, look, your king is coming, sitting on a donkey's colt. So while some were believing, others were getting more and more upset and jealous of the attention that Yeshua was getting in the hearts of the people. It says here, so with the crowd, which had been with Yeshua when he called Lazarus out of the tomb and raised him from the dead, kept on telling everybody about it. They wouldn't shut up about it. It was also for this reason that the crowd came out to meet him, because they heard that he had performed this sign. Again, the sign that only Messiah could do, one of the signs. So the Pharisees said to each other, you see that you can't do anything. Look, the whole world has taken off after him. What we're doing, guys, is not working. What we're doing in trying to oppose him, they're going to go and announce and proclaim him to be the Messiah with or without our help. And what we're doing is not stopping at all. So they're starting to panic. So even Yeshua, opposition to Yeshua at the Passover, comes from him getting attention and glory. That's where it is. Attention and glory goes to Yeshua when we participate in the Passover, because the people who love God are going to be drawn to him. People who are called of God are going to be drawn to him. And so is it really any different today?
Yeah.
Is it really any different? Are people going to be drawn to Messiah when we keep Passover? Yeah. Are people going to be upset about it when we keep Passover and proclaim him king? Yeah. It's okay. It's accepted so long as we don't point people to Yeshua. Even with the signs and the proof right in front of them at this time, in this day, it was hard for some to believe. In fact, some were blinded to it. And it's still the same. Some are still blind. Among the Jewish people, among the Gentiles, even among those who go to the church, who think they know them when they don't. Because see, for some, the blindness that we have comes through the routine of religion and spirituality. Sometimes our blindness comes from thinking we're good when we're really not. Thinking that they're saved when they are not. They are the tares among the wheat, the wolves among the sheep, and they oppose the things that Yeshua is doing in opening the eyes of his people to the fulfillment of Passover. Look at it in John chapter 12, verse 37. So even though Yeshua had performed so many signs before them, there were some who still were not trusting in him. And this was to fulfill the word of Isaiah the prophet, who said, Adonai, who has believed our report, to whom has the arm of Adonai been revealed? And so for this reason, they could not believe. For Isaiah also said, he has blinded their eyes and hardened their hearts, so they might not see with their eyes, nor understand with their hearts, and turn back, and I would heal them. Isaiah said these things because he saw his glory and spoke of him. Isaiah saw whose glory? The glory of Messiah, the glory of Yeshua. Isaiah saw that. Just like back earlier in the Gospel of John, it says, Abraham looked forward to seeing my day, right? He saw it and was glad. And they're like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? You're not even 100 years old, and you're saying that you've seen Abraham? And he's like, look, Abraham looked forward to seeing my day. He saw it. Isaiah saw it hundreds of years before the day actually came. All right? So here they are. Some of them are blinded. And is it just Jewish people who are blinded to Yeshua? No, it's not. Because some of us were blind. How many times did we think, now that we are where we are, didn't we feel like we were blind before and didn't even realize it? It feels like our eyes have been opened to something that we couldn't see before. That's where we're at. It goes on in verse 42. Nevertheless, many, here's where it starts to switch. Even among the leaders, start to put their trust in him. That's pretty neat. Some of them who have been against it all this time, they're like, guys, we need to get on board with this or it's going to pass us by. We need to agree that he has done these things. They've already said they recognize he's done these signs. Are we going to believe it or not? Or are we more interested in losing our own position, losing our own power, and being defeated by the Romans and all that stuff? But some of them are starting to put their trust in them. But because of the Pharisees, they were not confessing Yeshua, so they would not be thrown out of the synagogue. Again, sometimes there's still pressures. So, for they love the glory of men more than the glory of God. They believed, but they were afraid to say anything about it. They were afraid to do it publicly. They were afraid to tell their friends. They were afraid to tell their family. They were afraid to tell their co-workers and things that they believed in Yeshua. Was that unique to this day? No, it's not. Again, we still face that same kind of struggle. But in the midst of all that, Yeshua cried out, whoever puts trust in me believes not in me, but in the one who sent me. And whoever beholds me beholds the one who sent me. If you've seen me, you have seen the Father. Right? As light I have come into the world, so that everyone who trusts in me should not remain in darkness. And if anyone hears my words but doesn't keep them, I do not judge him, for I came to save the world, not to judge the world. In other words, this is not the time. Is there going to be a day when he deals with that issue? Yeah. if you hear his words, if you shema, if you know his words, and you don't keep them, there's going to be a day where we're going to be accountable for that. Right? It might not be today, but we're closer to that day than they were. Right? Do we know his words? Do we keep them? That's one of the big questions that we have to keep asking ourselves. I thought I had this. So, here's some things, to kind of sum up some things. We should believe. We should believe in Yeshua because he has fulfilled all the signs of the Messiah. Right? Would y'all agree with that?
Yes.
Right? We should prepare ourselves for the Passover and proclaim Yeshua and draw people to him. Right? Y'all agree with that?
Yes.
We should also expect opposition and misunderstanding, shouldn't we? Because again, the enemy doesn't like it. And some people on both sides are not going to like the fact that we do the things that we do. But we should also pray that the Father opens the eyes of who? Both Jew and Gentile, to see the things that he has shown us. Both Jew and Gentile to Yeshua as Messiah and fulfillment of Passover. And we should faithfully obey God and keep his word, keep his commandments. That's who we should be. Despite the opposition. Despite the things, because it didn't stop him. And it shouldn't stop us. Does that make sense? I saw a thing in an article this morning saying that there have been more Christians and people killed in the last, I don't remember what it was, 25 years or whatever else, or 50 years because they were Christians than since like the beginning of the church. So, I can't remember exactly what it was, but there's been more people are being killed for their faith than any other time. And so, just because it's not happening here doesn't mean it's not happening. We sometimes are getting apathetic, yeah, but we are insulated from the persecution that's really going on. And we complain, things that go on here in this country, and that's not at all what others are having to deal with. But is that's going to get better, or is that going to get worse? It's going to get worse.
It's going to come here.
And it's going to come here, and we need to be prepared for that.